Things have become really tough for a lot of people, and how do I know that? Easy. I'm seeing less and less free stuff being given away, and instead they're trying to sell them. What's so wrong with that, you might ask? Nothing, except the items they're trying to sell would have been given away last year, but with things getting more expensive, people would like to get something back for it. I then have to pass on the extra cost to the buyers, but does that mean you'll always get a good mower to fix and sell? Well, we're about to find out. In today's video, we're going to be looking at this Yard Machine's lawnmower, and the problem is that according to the ad where I found it, it will not start. Of course, there could be a half dozen reasons why it won't start, but before we start guessing at one of them, we'll have to take a look around and see if anything obvious stands out. Now, I'm going to try and repair this lawnmower, but yours might be different, so this might not work on yours. So if things are not working out for you, like in the video, please ask about it, and I'll be glad to answer your questions. So the first item to stand out as a problem is the lack of a proper filter cover and also the air filter itself. I can only guess that they lost the cover and didn't want to spend the money to get the right one and instead made this one work. I'll use the term work very loosely because I don't think it worked all that well, especially since it looks like they didn't bother making an air filter either. Next, we need to check on the all-important oil level, and of course its condition might be important as well. Now, surprisingly, its condition is pretty good, meaning at some point someone must have changed it because I doubt this oil is 8 years old. And with the oil right in the middle of the markings on the dipstick, I think that pretty much confirms that at some point someone was taking care of this mower. I know it's tough to tell, but there is some gasoline in the fuel tank. It is barely covering the screen at the bottom, which means there should be fuel in the fuel lines as well as the carb. The reason why that's important is because I want to collect all the fuel that I can and inspect it for anything that might be wrong with it. Since I know there's plenty of oil and possibly some gasoline in the carb, I think it's time to try and start it. For this part, I'm going to help it by physically priming the engine though. So luckily it started and ran, which is great news. However, since it did not stay running, it means there's something wrong with part of the fuel system. That means either the fuel jet inside the carb might be clogged and not allowing any fuel to pass through it, or it could be the fuel itself that's the problem. Now, if you tried to do the very same thing I did, but yours did not start at all, then you might not have spark and you'll need to check it before moving on. So yet another surprise is that the underside of the mowing deck is in really good condition. Either someone was cleaning underneath here or they never mowed the grass when it was wet. So after taking off the blade for sharpening and balancing, I'll take this opportunity to clean off any dried grass from the bottom of the mowing deck. I'll then give it a quick spray and rinse just to get rid of the remaining grass that I didn't get scraped off of it. And even though it might be a little too much for this part of the mower, I'll be using the same degreaser on here as the rest of the mower as well. Now once dried off, you can try and apply some sort of coating underneath here, but I will let you know that it won't last very long. So I have to give them some credit, at least they tried to fix the cover. However, as you can see, without an air filter, just having a cover won't do much in the way of protecting the engine. Now, if they had stuffed that space with some sort of rag or a piece of foam, that would have been a decent attempt to fix it. So this is the cover I ordered to replace it. Just to let you know, all these covers are not the same, so be very careful when ordering the one for yours. I left the link on the screen for this one if this is the one you need for your machine. Now, I'm not going to replace the air filter just yet, and that's because I'm going to give this mower a quick cleaning before we start to work on it. I know that the original air filter is just a piece of foam and not a paper element, but as practice, I try to remove it so I don't get it wet and possibly damage it while cleaning it. And for those that are worried about getting water inside the engine, all I can say is try not to spray water directly into the muffler or the carb. So what I'm using is a paint sprayer, but only using water, and the reason is because it gives me a lot of pressure, but it uses very little water. This gives me a lot more cleaning ability as opposed to a lot of water with some pressure. Now using a garden hose tends to just get the mower wet versus getting it cleaned, but there's nothing wrong with it. If you're washing your mower on the concrete, then using a lot of water is not an issue. But since I'm working in the grass, too much water has a way of getting the ground very soggy, which can damage the grass if you stand there for too long. The last area we need to clean is around the cooling fins and also the area behind the carb where dirt likes to build up over time. It's your choice if you want to go this far, but doing this will make sure the engine will have good cooling and possibly last a lot longer. After the last rinsing, give the mower a couple of hours to dry off, or if you're in a hurry, you can use your leaf blower to help out. Next, we're going to take off the dirty air filter base so we can take the carb off for an inspection. Now, when taking off the base, don't forget that the breather tube for the emissions hose was connected to the back of it. So this is when we realize just how important it is to have a good working air filter in the airbox. As you can see, dirt was able to make it in the air inlet for the carb, which means it also made it inside the engine, which is not a good thing. That dirt could damage a lot of parts in the engine, and if it's been ran like this for a long time, it could cause it to wear out faster than it's supposed to. Now once the carb is off the engine, we want to carefully pry off the fuel bowl, and that's because we want to see what all was inside there. Now there's not much you can see while it's in the bowl because of how dark it is, so it's best to pour it out into a glass jar. It's only then that we see why this engine was having some starting issues. So what you're looking at is a blob of water at the bottom of the jar, which of course is not supposed to be in there. And if there is water in the carb, it could also mean that there's still some water in the fuel tank as well, which there was. Of course, if water does get into your fuel system, it's going to keep the engine from running, so you'll need to drain all that you can from it before you put new gasoline in the tank. And there's also no guarantee that the carb will be in working condition either, so you might as well take it apart for a good cleaning. Now, most times when I do this job, there's really not much to clean. However, this time is going to be a bit special, but not in the good way. Now, even though the main jet looks fairly clear, we're going to make sure it's as clear as possible. But it's when we get to this jet that we see the problem. This jet needs to be cleared as well. But as you can tell, it's completely clogged with dirt because that dirt was able to get past the non-existent air filter. Now, fortunately, it looks like the dirt was not packed in the jet, and just taking it apart was enough to dislodge most of it. So after taking off as much as we can from this carb, we're going to use an ultrasonic cleaner to help us clean it, but there's an issue. So I can't just throw the main body of the carb in the cleaner this way. The reason why is because all that dirt on the body will pollute the solution and could possibly deposit the dirt somewhere where it shouldn't be. You'll see what I mean later on, but in hindsight, I probably should have cleaned off the body of the carb before taking it apart. So after 30 minutes of cleaning, I'll then remove the solution, that way we can do a rinsing cycle in clean water. Now you don't have to use an ultrasonic to clean your carb. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's almost faster and better if you do it the traditional way. So while the carb is going through its cleaning cycle, I'm going to use this time to sharpen and balance the blade. Now before I sharpen the blade, I'm going to check and see if it might be out of balance, and if it is, I can try and balance it while I'm sharpening it. Now doing it this way will take less time. Of course, this is for the sake of filming, and any other time I would just take the balancer with me while I'm sharpening it. So here are the parts right out of the bath, and they seem to look pretty clean, which is what you expect with a machine like an ultrasonic cleaner. But believe it or not, you're not done with them just yet. Now the ultrasonic does a fantastic job of loosening dirt and grime, but you'll still need to help remove it from certain parts of the carb. Just to prove my point, while I was handling the main body of the carb, I saw what looked like a clump of dirt sitting inside it. Now this was partly my fault for not turning the carb while it was in the ultrasonic, but it does show you that something like this could happen if you're not careful. Now once you get the carb as clean as possible, we can start to put it back together again. Okay, so here's the deal. If you've never done something like this before and you're not sure if you want to start now, then take the easy way out. I'm of course talking about just going online and ordering a brand new aftermarket carb for not a lot of money. The reason why you might want to do this is because you value your time and money and also may not have the time to invest. Plus, if you're not careful and try to take the carb apart and lose one of the parts, you'll just end up having to order a new one anyway. Now what I did to this carb was not very complicated or difficult to do, but it does take some care and patience. So it's up to you whether or not you try and clean it, but I will let you know that from personal experience, aftermarket carbs have about a 95% success rate. Also, don't forget to install the O-ring and its white plastic retainer on the backside of the carb. Otherwise, you're going to have a tough time starting the engine because there's going to be an air leak there. Now before you install the carb, be sure and look around it to make sure that the bowl is not on there crooked. If it is, you'll need to take it off and install it again, making sure that it's on straight. Then carefully reconnect the linkage for the governor and then slide the carb back onto the intake pipe. After that, reconnect the fuel line to the tank, replace the clamp, and then install the tank back onto the engine. Of course, we can't forget to reconnect the emissions hose to the port on the backside of the base. If you do forget on this style of carb with a foam filter, it'll allow it to get dirtier faster than normal and could cause the engine to run poorly. Now a big mistake is to install your brand new filter without oiling it. Now the foam itself will not filter dirt from the air very well. That's the reason why you need to oil it. I've already oiled this one, so it's ready to install. So we're in the home stretch right now, and all we need to do is to replace the recoil assembly, put some fuel into the tank and check for leaks, and oh, I almost forgot, we need to install the blade. Now you can start a mower without a blade. I know that because I've done it before. But when pulling on the rope, you're going to notice that something is really wrong. Without the blade to act as a counterweight, the engine is going to rotate a lot differently, and that's what you're going to notice the most. The very last thing to do is to put the rope back through its guide and then prime the engine and then hopefully start it. Now it's been running for about 5 minutes, so it should be close to normal operating temperature. Next we'll see if it'll start back up when the engine is hot. So luckily the engine starts easily with a very soft pull when it's hot or cold, which is great news. What that means is that more than likely the engine's valve clearances are close to what they're supposed to be. We now have the difficult choice of going through the process to inspect it anyway or leaving it the way that it is and count our blessings. Now the reason I'm hesitating is that if we take out the valve cover, it could damage the gasket and cause a very slow leak, which could risk damaging the engine in the future. Now, if the gasket is a more durable rubber material and not paper, I won't have an issue checking it, but there's almost no way to tell unless you take it off and see for yourself. I guess we'll find out in the next video when we address the final details before we let it go to its new home. Now, so far we've invested only the purchase price, which was almost nothing, but we'll have to see if that trend continues in the next video. So my question is, up until this point, do you think this project was a good investment? Now, I'm no accountant, but as far as money goes, I'd say it was. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.